It's time for SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the Pee Dee region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution. Our guest today is Michelle Schohn, who is an American Indian and a member of the Pee Dee Indian Nation of Beaver Creek, where she serves as the tribe's historian and genealogist. Michelle is a retired senior Foreign Service officer with the U.S. Department of State. She's served in Jerusalem, Tallinn, Estonia, Pristina, Kosovo, and Washington, D.C. And prior to serving with the Foreign Service, she was a Ph.D. candidate in archaeology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She has her bachelor's in English journalism and a master's in anthropology and archaeology from the University of South Carolina and a master's in national resource security strategy from the Eisenhower School of National Defense in Washington. And Michelle speaks German, Albanian, Estonian, and Hebrew. Wow, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Well, we thank you for being with us. And now let me ask you something. Native American is the term that we hear most folks using when they're talking about American Indians, but you say American Indian. Tell us the distinction about that, please.
So when people first started using Native American, I think that it was, really people were trying to be polite. They were, American Indian isn't accurate because, the folks here weren't from India. But the reality is that Native American really doesn't clarify anything up. I mean, if you were born in the Americas, you are a Native American. And that doesn't really indicate that you're an indigenous person. I have always used American Indian because my grandmother, my great-grandfather, they all, when they talked to me about who we were, they said that we were Indian. And if it was good enough for my grandparents and great-grandparents to say that we were Indian, then I say that I'm an Indian.
Awesome. Now, you're going to talk with us about the American Revolution from the perspective of the American Indians.
Right. So, the Indian tribes were not in South Carolina one sort of united group of people. And so you had tribes that were siding with both the Americans and with the British. And my tribe in particular, the Pee Dee, sided with the Americans. We've got a long history of always siding with our neighbors. So even during the Civil War, we fought for the Confederacy because those were our neighbors. We always, served with the people who were around us. And really, I wonder if that's not one of the reasons why we weren't removed when a lot of other Indian people were removed to the west. But my great-grandfather would tell me about the service of the Pee Dee Indians in the American Revolution, and he was particularly proud of that. He was proud that we had served with the Patriots, and would tell me stories about the swamp fox, for example, always had at least one American Indian with him to help him get through the swamps because we were swamp Indians. We lived in the swamps on the Pee Dee River. We later lived in the swamps down on the Edisto River, and we would help him navigate through. And he said those were members of our tribe. Those were Pee Dee Indians helping Francis Marion get through the swamps and defeat the British.
Awesome. Michelle, tell us about where the Pee Dee Nation, where you were located.
So currently we sort of have two primary bands, one that is located still on the Pee Dee River and one that is located on the Edisto River in the Neces North Sally area. It's sort of a historical artifact of why we ended up in two separate bands. The colonial South Carolina established a reservation for us in 1738 on the Edisto River to move us down from the Pee Dee River. And the folks who are in the band that are in Orangeburg County now, primarily in Orangeburg and Aiken counties now, basically moved from there to upriver on the Edisto River, while the band that is in McCall is the more senior band, and they are the ones who moved back to the Pee Dee River because that was our ancestral homeland. That's the land that we call home.
Okay, and that's probably the one that most of our residents around here are familiar with. So thank you.
Absolutely. The folks who are based out of McCall, we would say that is the senior band. They are the people who are the caretakers of our traditional homeland.
Okay. And so your ancestors played a good role in the American Revolution. And it's very exciting about helping get the swamp fox through the swamp.
Yeah. And so then I know Chris talked to you a little bit also about that there was actually a company of PD Indian soldiers. It was a riflery company that they were called the Raccoon Company or the Foot Rangers or Foot Rovers. They initially were organized by Captain John Alston, who had a plantation up on the PD River, and so he was very familiar with the PD tribe. He, together with Benjamin Coachman, who was living down on the Edisto River and who had a role in setting up his father had a role in setting up the reservation on the Edisto River. He knew of the band that was living on the Edisto River, and so they combined those two to bring them together to form this one company. And John Alston so desperately wanted to have his own company, and they didn't feel like he was quite qualified to have a company of white soldiers, so he put together this company of Indian soldiers instead so that he could have a company in the Revolution. And he managed to keep that company together for about a year, and then they just absorbed all of our folks under Colonel William Thompson's 3rd Regiment. They felt like the company was doing a good job, but Alston wasn't necessarily doing such a great job. So we've got folks from both of our bands serving under Colonel William Thompson's 3rd Regiment and all of the battles that he was involved in. And you'll find that even today, every person who is a member of either one of those bands is descended from at least one person who served in the Revolutionary War. So we all have this proud tradition of serving the American cause to fight for the freedom for this country.
What else can you tell us about the PD Nation?
So I put together, back when I was doing this research, I put together a list of all of those. I was able to identify, I believe, 49 of the 50 members of Raccoon Company, and they're all the same last names that we are familiar with that live in our areas now, and that our neighbors who live around us, they're familiar with. They know the Chavises and the Cummings and the Halls and the Hunts. There are Wootons, there are Gibsons, there are Williams, Oxendines. All of these are the folks that were descendants of the people who fought in this company in the Revolutionary War. As they got split out, it helps to know a little bit of the genealogy of the white officers who were in charge, because they would move some of the men around based on family connections between some of the white officers. But in total, these 50 men served for the American cause and have passed down the traditions of that through our families, so that most all of us are aware that all of us could be members of the DAR or the Sons of the American Revolution because we've got that tradition in our family.
Absolutely, and I certainly hope that a lot of you will participate in those fine organizations.
I actually got a small scholarship from the DAR back when I was in high school because of my ancestry of having ancestors. So I descend from several of the men who fought in the Revolutionary War, and so I got a small scholarship in high school for that.
That is very exciting. So our American Indian Nation, the PD Nation, which is headquartered in McCall, is that the headquarters or in McCall?
So there's of the two bands, yeah. The one that your listeners would be most familiar with is headquartered in McCall, and that's the PD Indian Nation. And then there's the PD Indian Nation of Beaver Creek that's headquartered in Nices, South Carolina. And like I say, they after the Revolutionary War, the person who was the chief of the PD in the Nices area, Lewis Jones, received a land grant from the American government for 2,000 acres for the tribe to have a place to live down on the Edisto River. And most of the people in that area still live sort of in the vicinity of that land grant. The rest of the PD, the primary band of PD up in McCall, they live in the areas around the PD River where they've always lived.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Michelle Schohn has been our guest today. Michelle is a member of the PD Indian Nation, and she serves as the tribe's historian and genealogist. And you've been listening to SC250 Tuesday, bringing you information about Chesterfield County, the PD region, and South Carolina's role in the American Revolution, and brought to you by SC250. I'm Jane Pigg.